From TeachIllinois.com, this is The Teacher's Classroom, the podcast that explores current issues and topics in education and how they relate to teaching and students. Here is your host, Matt Weld.
All right. We have John Wagnon on the line, I guess you'd say it. John, can you go ahead and introduce yourself, please?
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Matt. My name's John Wagnon. I'm the board president for O'Fallon District 90 School Board. And just to give you a little bit of a background on myself, I've not always lived in O'Fallon. I was in the Air Force when I graduated college for about 9 years, almost 9 years. Moved all over the world. But Scott Air Force Base here in the O'Fallon area was my last Air Force base. Got out of the Air Force here at Scott. And I was a contractor doing some computer network security kind of stuff for the Air Force. Did that for a number of years, and then a position up in Seattle, Washington opened up. Still doing computer network, computer security type work, and I've been working for them for about 5.5 years now. So anyway, but we love O'Fallon. My wife and I have 4 kids, 3 girls and a boy, and have lived here, I guess all in all, since about 2003. There was a little bit of a break there when the Air Force moved us out to Ramstein, Germany. But anyway, we're back here now and consider this home. And I guess in terms of the school board thing, I never held an elected position before and didn't really know much about school board or all of that. But my kids were in those classrooms, and I was just thinking, hey, someone is on that school board, whatever that school board does. We'll talk about that today. And someone's going to make those decisions for, how they're educated or how their educational opportunities present themselves and all that stuff. So I thought, hey, let me throw my hat in the ring. And a little quick story on that. It was kind of funny. Having not been from here, so I wasn't really a known entity in this area. I ran initially back in 2011, and I was the very last vote getter. I came in dead last in that election, and anyway, but I didn't let that stop me. So I thought, hey, let me try it again. So next election rolls around. It was actually 2013, so a couple of years later, and I got in. So I don't know exactly what to, attribute that to. Maybe my name kind of got a little more well known or, whatever. So, but in a couple of years I was able to work it out. And so I've been on the board since 2013. And in 2015, I was selected as the board president. And we can go into a little bit of that if you want to later. But anyway, so I've been board president since 2015. So coming up on about 4 years now in April. So that's a little bit of a background from me. And so here I am, board president for O'Fallon District 90.
Well, and full disclosure, I used to work for O'Fallon District 90. So I just, right. John, you were on the board while I was there. So
that's right. Yeah. And hey, and you did great work. We were, it's a bittersweet thing. I know you're doing great things now for education in Illinois. And, so we're thankful that you're able to move on and do those things, but hated to see you go from District 90. So,
well, thank you. But the purpose of today's podcast is to kind of give board member / president 101 session for, teachers and educators. So you kind of stole my first question, which was going to be, why did you choose to run? And I think that has to do with, just wanting to be a connected member of the community. Right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. So maybe to expand on that just a touch, I mentioned this, but yeah, initially I didn't have any idea really what the school board did. I mean, you hear the term school board, there is a school board and they vote on things, they approve things or whatever. But, I guess from a very basic perspective, I knew that the board made, leadership type decisions for the educational opportunities of the kids in this district. And so I thought, man, again, those are my kids sitting in those classrooms, and somebody's got to make that decision. Somebody's got to, take that leadership role. So let me give it a shot, So I did.
And so not having a background in education yourself and then throwing your hat into the ring, what would you say was your biggest surprise?
Yeah. So I guess the initial approach that I took was having not, like you said, having not had an educational background, is that I knew that I didn't know very much, so it's, so I knew that the first few months, maybe year, et cetera, would be a steep learning curve for me. And so I really just kind of latched on to a couple of more senior board members and talked to them a lot. I talked to superintendent, met with teachers, met with principals, and just said, hey, help me understand how this whole thing works. And there's a lot of things that go into it. So in terms of some surprises, obviously funding is a big deal. It costs money to do anything. And just the way that dollars are allocated to school districts in Illinois. Frankly, I don't know if it's a unique thing or how unique it is, but there's a certain process that it follows. And so you need to understand that process in order to be able to, understand how the funding works. And then there's curriculum discussions. There are, building and facility issues, all kinds of different things that come into play here that I guess having not been in the middle of it, I didn't realize that, hey, you know what, we do have to think about those things. So really I took the first year and a half of just really learning. And it seemed like, and maybe this is a common thing or not, but it seemed like the funding, the budget stuff was a really big deal. And, those were in some of the years where, housing market was not exploding like it had done, 4, 5, 6 years prior. So we're trying to make decisions on, how do you cut back on budget and, those types of things. And it's, but then when you do that, how do you affect tax rates for your fellow citizens around town? And anyway, there's just a lot that goes into that kind of stuff. So I just, I guess I was in learning mode for a good year and a half. And that's not to say I'm not still in learning mode. I still learn new stuff every day, it seems like. But those were, I guess, if I were to say what was the surprising thing, it was just the amount of, the amount of detail things that go on, just the vastness of it all, if you will, that you have to consider. And frankly, if you want to be a good board member, in my opinion, you need to study hard and learn about those things. So,
And do you think that would be a fairly common surprise for people on the board? I mean, have you talked to your other board members? And
I think so. I think that generally speaking, there definitely are things that people, you come on the board and you may see things from an outside perspective and think, hey, I understand that the board deals with these certain types of issues. And some of them are pretty obvious, pretty clear. But I think if people were being honest, I think they would admit to the fact that, hey, there are some things that I just did not consider, or I just did not realize that's the way that the law is set up, for example, or back to funding. Hey, I didn't realize that's how funding works and, from an educational perspective in Illinois, or those types of things. I think that there are certainly some people that, I'm not saying that this is a positive thing necessarily, but some people come onto the board with an agenda and they say, hey, I'm going to get on the board, I'm going to fix, X, Y, or Z. And that can be problematic. But I think for the most part, people come onto the board, they just want to do a good job. They understand that, these are our kids and our community that we need to educate, and we want to do the best job that we can. And so, but I think once they get on the board, then they're like, wow, this is, there's maybe a bit more to it than I initially thought,
Well, and besides content, you guys spend a lot of time. You guys volunteer a lot of time to the school. Yeah. Did you understand how many meetings that there would be and everything?
Yeah, that's another surprising thing. I guess, trying to think back to before I ran for the board, I knew that there was a board meeting. We have ours on a Tuesday night. It's the third Tuesday of every month. And I just assumed that, hey, board meeting starts at 7:00 on Tuesday night, once a month, and probably 8:30, everyone's out of there and you're good to go, Right. And that is not how it has played out. So, Yeah, so there definitely are more meetings. There are committee meetings. So we have, for example, in District 90, we have a building committee, we have a finance committee, we have a policy committee, we have other community type committees that we have in place, and so those committees need to meet, and sometimes they meet fairly frequently, so as to do some of the really detailed work that may not be quite applicable at a typical normal board meeting. So I say that to say you may be going to committee meetings or other meetings throughout the week, throughout the month, whatever. And it's definitely more than just, hey, just go to a 1 hour meeting once a month. And then I guess beyond that, even there are things like, now this is a once a year thing, but like graduation, for example, you go and the school board's up there, and the way we do it in District 90 is the school board president. So I'm the one that hands out the diploma to all the graduates. And that's a fun thing. I mean, that's a great time, but that's obviously another time commitment. There are different training events that we may need to go to or participate in. And then I've also found that it's important to be connected, closely connected to the city, to the aldermen, the city council members, and the mayor, and that kind of thing, because a lot of the decisions that they make with respect to, say, roads or infrastructure or taxes or whatever, then they could very, very easily affect the school district, or frankly things that we may be planning. It would be good if they know, so that they can get in line with what we're doing. So it's just there needs to be a good team effort there. But in order for that to happen, you need to stay connected with those people, and that takes time. So yeah, there's definitely more of a time commitment than I would have thought.
Yeah. So, all right, let's shift a little bit and talk about the purpose of the board. Like in Illinois school systems, what is the purpose?
Yeah. So, I was looking this up. There's some good literature. There's an organization called the IASB. It's the Illinois Association of School Boards. It's an organization in Illinois that we're a member of, and they help with training events and that kind of thing. And they've outlined 6 fundamental, purposes, as it were, of a school board. And I think that they are a good representation of what the purpose of the school board is. And so I'll just run through those really quickly. We can go into detail more if you want, but the first one is the board clarifies the district purpose. The quick note I would make about that is that's typically done through policy, where we write the policies of the district, and that clarifies, what we are doing in a school district. So we create policy, we change policy, that kind of thing, and that governs the school district. The next one is the board connects with the community. So it's important for us, and I talked about this a second ago with the city council, but even beyond that, just the people that live in O'Fallon, it's important for us to connect with them, let them know what we're doing as a school district, and be open and transparent about what we're deciding as a board. So we need to connect with them. The third one that they list is the board employs a superintendent. And this one is important because technically the school board is the boss of the superintendent of the district. And it's also interesting because the superintendent is actually our only employee from a school board perspective. So if we need to interact with someone from a formal perspective, then we would interact with the superintendent, and then the superintendent then would go down to the principals or the teachers or the other staff. But employing or hiring, firing the superintendent is one of the most important jobs or roles of the school board. The fourth one here is the board delegates authority. So back to that superintendent thing, we need to understand our role, and we need to delegate authority down to, whether it's committee members or the superintendent is a huge one, obviously. So we need to understand that the board doesn't do everything in the district. We need to delegate authority down the chain of command, as it were, as appropriate. The fifth one is the board monitors performance. So we look at how things are being run in the school district. I heard one person, in fact, this was our superintendent, Carrie Ruby, who does an awesome job, by the way. So for those that listen to this, Carrie Ruby is an awesome superintendent. She used the example of like a music orchestra, and she said the board is like the composer of the music, the one that writes the music down on the paper, that comes up with the music. Mm-hmm. And so that would be done kind of in the form of our policies and the governance that we have. And then the superintendent is the conductor, like the one standing up there in front of the orchestra, all the people that are playing. So the superintendent is the one that is executing the policy, the one that is coordinating and and doing that job. And then the staff, the principals, and everyone else is the one playing the actual music. So again, board is the one that writes the music, superintendent conducts the music, and then staff actually plays the music. So anyway, I say that to say as we monitor performance, the board then needs to step back and say, hey, how, to use that music term again, how well is that music being played? How good does it sound? Do we need to make some changes to the music that we have written in the form of, in this case, policies, that kind of thing? And so we need to monitor ourselves, and we do that. We set up board goals, and we look at kind of a self-governance action to say, hey, let's kind of check in on ourselves from time to time. So anyway, so that's the monitor performance. Then the last one is the board takes responsibility for itself. And so when things happen, we need to own what we do. We need to say, hey, this was the decision of the board, and we need to own that decision. And sometimes those are good things, and we're patting ourselves on the back, or other people are, whatever. But there are definitely times where things are not great, and we need to take responsibility. So anyway, so I went down. I know those were 6 things. I didn't mean to take too long on all that, but those are critical things that the board does.
So I think there's just one I want to expand on a little bit, and you yourself said it was the most important probably, and that was your relationship with the superintendent. I think it's important for people to understand that you employ the superintendent, right? Right. And so basically the community through their elected officials, this is that whole checks and balances thing, right? For democracy, you guys are in charge of the superintendent.
That's right.
So you must be in pretty frequent contact with your superintendent. Is that,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that the interaction, the communication that a board has with the superintendent is absolutely critical. It's exactly what you just said. And I mentioned it before that from a board perspective, our employee is the superintendent. And so just like any good, boss and, subordinate relationship would go, there needs to be good communication there. That does not mean that we're in the superintendent's office every single day saying, hey, tell me what you did today. And, I want to recap on everything. That's not the case. There certainly is a trust that needs to be there. And frankly, for our district, I can speak for District 90, there certainly is a trust. And I mentioned it earlier, Carrie Ruby does an amazing job. But nonetheless, you still need to maintain communication. So a few examples, Carrie does a great job of sending out updates to the board, maybe via email, or if we need to have an in-person meeting, we'll do that. Try to do a lot of email if possible, just from her to us to say, hey, this is, these are relevant things that are going on around the district. And then every time we have a school board meeting, so that's once a month, the actual, Board of Education meeting that happens on those Tuesdays I talked about, Carrie and I will sit down prior to that and go over the agenda, make sure everything's on the agenda properly, and just review all the details of that. But then again, beyond that, all the other committee meetings that I talked about earlier, or, city involvement or things like that, there's just a fairly constant stream of communication, again, whether it's email or phone call or, whatever the means needs to be, or I'll swing by, her office or that kind of thing. But yes, there's absolutely, that relationship there is a critical one.
Yes. And I wasn't aware of that as a teacher, but then as I got into administration, I you start talking as an administrator, you start talking to the superintendent more, and then you understand that they talk to the board a lot, and which, and open communication and building relationships, as I always say, is key to pretty much everything.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. You mentioned that some people get on the board with an agenda, and I don't really want to dwell on that necessarily, but
sure.
I imagine there are some members of the community who see you as their way into the schools.
Right.
So I've heard stories of, community members talking to a board member about something that they didn't like in school. So instead of going through, the classroom teacher, which then goes to the principal, which then goes, you know what I'm saying, the normal chain of command, they probably skip straight to you because you're the one they know.
Right.
How do you handle that? And,
Yeah, no, that is a fantastic question. It happens. I won't say it happens for me personally a lot, but it definitely happens. And I guess to an extent, you think about the parent's perspective, and you think, hey, maybe I know them personally, or we're friends, or they've just seen my name, and so it's like, hey, there's John in the store or something like that. I'll just go kind of hit him up or whatever the case is. The way that I typically handle those situations is, one, I understand that the parent is coming to me because they're frustrated about something, or something's gone wrong or whatever. Very rarely does a parent come up to you and say, hey, John, I just want to tell you how awesome this teacher is. It's typically a problem. So anyway, so what I try to do is just be patient, listen to the situation, be understanding, that whole thing, and try to get a good understanding of exactly what's going on. Because frankly, at that point, I guess in my mind, what I'm trying to do that entire time is understand who is the proper person to talk to begin with. And very, very often, in fact, I can't remember an example. This is not the case. Very often, it is not the school board president that you need to start the conversation with. And so, not that I'm not happy to talk to people. I am, but let's run this through the chain of command, just like you talked about. And so primarily, what I'm looking for, what I'm listening for, is who do you need to talk to begin with. And typically it's the teacher, it's the classroom teacher, just like you said. Sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes it may be like a facilities director, or it may be a curriculum coordinator or something like that. It just depends on the situation. And then, and so at that point, then I'll ask the person, again, in a nice way, I'll say, hey, have you talked to maybe the teacher about this? And if they have, if the answer is yes, then it's like, okay, well, what happened there? And did this go to the principal? Because the principal needs to be involved. And if the answer is like, no, I don't, I've got the principal and I don't get along or whatever, it's like, okay, I get it now. I get why you're coming to me or whatever. Or maybe they just said, no, I didn't want to bother the principal or take their time or whatever. So, and I saw you here, so I'm talking to you. So I say all that to say, I try my best to focus the issue back down to the place where it needs to start and where it needs to get resolved. And, I've done that many times, and I cannot remember an example where that did not work out just fine. So basically what I'm saying is, when that has happened, the person has ultimately gone to the leader or the administrator, whatever, that is the appropriate place to go to, and then it works itself out, And so anyway, and then sometimes also, as we have those conversations, what I'll do is, maybe after I talk to that person, I'll give Carrie Ruby, our superintendent, a quick heads up and say, hey, Carrie, just want to let you know, I just had this conversation. And then also sometimes I'll give a quick heads up to, say, a principal who's about to get a phone call about something, kind of a thing, just to let them know, hey, this is coming. Not that they can't handle it without me saying that, but just, it just gives them a little heads up.
Right.
So anyway, so that's how I try to handle those things.
Yeah. I would imagine that's kind of a unexpected challenge that comes with a job, because like you said, technically your only employee is the superintendent.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, it is it's a bit unexpected, but at the same time, I guess if you think about it, from a parent perspective or beyond that, even a taxpayer perspective, then it's like, hey, we collectively, the voters, have put you in this spot. Therefore, you answer to us. Therefore, you need to be available for us to give feedback and criticism and accolades and all those different things.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, from that perspective, then I totally get it, and I'm totally willing to hear those things. But just because I was the one put in that position by the voters doesn't mean that I ultimately handle every situation that comes up in the entire district. That's why, if that were the case, I'd be the only person in the district or whatever.
Right.
So that's why we have all of the staff that we have, doing the great work that they do. So I'm happy to listen to people, but then, get them to the place where they need to go. And I'll tell them too, every time I'll say, hey, I'm going to point you to the place where you really need to start this conversation. And if this is not resolved, then come back to me and I'll be happy to step in as needed. But I don't ever remember having to go back and step in to help resolve the situation. It's, I point them to the place they need to go. They go there and I never hear another word about it, which is great. It basically, I take that to say, okay, they resolved everything.
Right. That's how it should work.
Right. Exactly.
So can we talk a little bit about, from a teacher point of view, I'm thinking back to when I was a teacher and my view of the board. And it seems like my first interaction with a board was when I was first hired.
Yeah.
Right. So my first board meeting was when I went before the board and I was said, you're going to be hired at this board meeting. Well, to me, that was unexpected because I went through an interview and everything and I was offered the job by the principal.
Right.
And so can you just briefly explain what the board's role is in the hiring process?
Of course. No, that's a great question. Great question. And one that I think a lot of people like yourself, it's like, hey, why do we need this board thing? I just got the job offer from the principal.
Right.
So technically by law, the hiring and firing and all that of personnel actions in the district is a board decision. And so the way that works is the principals will interview, say a teacher position or, whatever the position would need to be. And so the principals will do that, or maybe the superintendent or whoever needs to be involved. And they will offer the job to the person. But technically by law, it's a contingent offer or it's a, pending offer, pending the board approval. So I guess it's that last check and balance, if you will, to say, hey, the board is the group of people who have been elected by the citizens. They're the ones that, are kind of at the top of the chain of command, if you will, on the school district. And so, again, hiring and firing actions, all that come through the board. So from our perspective, from the board perspective, the way that we get that is we get we call it a personnel report, every month at our normal board meetings, and it will list all the people, hey, we want to hire this person for this spot or that or whatever. And, do you approve these hiring actions? And for me personally, that was an interesting thing for me when I first came on the board, because I was like, well, honestly, I feel bad, but I don't know all these people and I wasn't involved in the hiring process. I mean, I wasn't there in the interview, right? So how do I know to say yes or no? Mm-hmm. And the more that I dug into that, I started to learn and appreciate the fact that I don't necessarily have to be in the interview process. That's not scalable for me to be in every single interview around the whole district. But what I do need to do is trust the process that brought me the names of those people to make this hiring decision on, and so or this approval for all of these personnel actions. And by that, I mean, I need to trust that the superintendent that we have hired and the processes that our superintendents put into place for hiring are legitimate, good hiring processes. And in fact, those are the things that I've started to ask for and have asked for in the past is, hey, don't tell me the background or the biography of every single person, but tell me the process that was used to get this person.
Mhm.
And so it's, hey, superintendent works with principals, and they outline the, some of the foundational qualities that they're looking for in a teacher. Some of the things, hey, if it's this position that's open, these are the types of things that we're looking for. And then beyond that, does the superintendent then have faith and trust in the principal who is actually there in the interview? And does that principal have, has that principal gone through the appropriate process of, screening the candidates, and we do a background check, and we do these, various things. These are the things that we do for our candidates. And so then at that point, if I trust all of that, like, from superintendent all the way down to prospective employer for, prospective teacher or staff or whatever, then as those names start to come back up to me on the board, then I can look at that list and I can say, all right, if this list has passed the check of that principal who I trust, it's gone through the process that I trust that principal did go through, the superintendent that I trust has looked at it, then now it's come to me. And unless I have some very specific information about, oh, hey, I know, John Doe over here, and that guy's no good for this, and this reason, and maybe he slipped through the cracks, whatever. Then at that point for me, I have now trusted the process and the people in place to the point that I can say, okay, yes, I approve, whatever you guys are recommending. And so, but like I said, by the legal definition of it all, the Board of Education actually hires, the final hiring authority is given to the Board of Education. So we have to approve that or not. So yeah. But it is an interesting thing though. And it's kind of interesting too, where sometimes you'll be at a board meeting and then you'll look around and you'll say, hey, there's like these random people that you don't typically see there. And then you make a hiring decision and everyone's like, smiling and congratulating. You're like, oh,
that's why they're here.
Yeah. Congratulations, everybody. So it's a good thing though. It's a good thing.
Yeah. So, this wasn't one of our predetermined questions, but I think another big role that you guys have that teachers become involved with is negotiations.
Yes, that's a huge one.
Yeah. So can you just briefly explain what your role is as a school board in the whole negotiation when the contract comes up because it's more than just salary, but when the contract comes up for negotiation, what is your responsibility and how does that work in concert, I guess, if we're going to use Carrie Ruby's metaphor here?
That's right. Good.
With,
it's great.
The principals, the superintendent, all the finance people, all that kind of stuff.
Yes, that's a fantastic question. And man, we could probably do a whole podcast just on contract negotiations. But that's another one, by the way, that I had to learn a lot about, talking about finances and stuff earlier. So the very basic answer, and maybe I can go into a little more detail on some of these, but the very basic answer is that the collective bargaining unit or the teacher union, as it were, enters into a contract with the school district, and more specifically, they enter into a contract with the Board of Education. And so when that happens, the Board of Education, at its most fundamental point, the Board of Education has to agree on the contract, and so does the collective bargaining unit, which in this case is the teacher union or the teachers in the district. And so as we go into these contract negotiations, each contract is for a certain length of time, and there's no law that says it can only be 1 year, or it must be 2 years, or it could be 3 or whatever. So to give you an example, we just finished a negotiation not long ago, and it's a 3-year contract. And so, which is great for us. That means we don't have to keep negotiating every single year. It's good for the teachers because, again, they don't have to keep negotiating. But as we entered into that, basically the way that we typically work that is we take the previous year's contract or the previous contract, which may have also been a multi-year contract, and in this case it was actually, we take that as sort of a foundational level, hey, let's use that going in and let's start to kind of tweak some things on that. And so from the Board of Education perspective, we will meet with people like our finance, business manager, or we will certainly meet with the superintendent. We may talk to some principals to say, hey, let me get some ideas about a couple of things. But most typically, it's the Board of Education and the superintendent, and we also have a lawyer for all that. You got to make sure everything's legal and stuff. Mm-hmm. So we have our lawyer there, and then we'll consult with our business manager, our finance director, essentially on all the finances of it all. So that's what we look at on our side, and we come to the table then in a new negotiation, a new contract, saying, hey, on the old contract it said this, but we now want it to say, X, Y, and Z. And then the teachers will, of course, do the exact same thing, and they have their union leadership that helps them. They have their own legal counsel as well on their side, which is great. And typically what they do is they'll have a representative sample of all of the different teachers. Maybe there's a teacher from each building, or maybe there's like a special ed teacher, or maybe there's like a PE teacher, or maybe there's a junior high or an elementary or whatever. So they have a good representation of their entire staff there in a group that says, hey, we have now come together and we are going to be the voices for all of the teachers, and they come to the table. And while the board may have asked for X, Y, and Z on the contract, well, the teachers are asking for A, B, and C. And sometimes A, B, and C line up really well with X, Y, and Z, but sometimes they do not. And so that's where the whole negotiation comes in. And so we'll have meetings, and typically when we really get down to the, hey, let's talk about the very extreme details of this, the board will allocate or appoint 2 people from the board, and then the teachers will appoint 2, maybe 3 people from their group, and we sit down in a room together and we say, okay, now this room only has about 5, 6 people in it, something like that, and now let's really get down to the details of, hey, like you mentioned, it's more than just salary. There's health insurance, there's tuition assistance, there's all kinds of different stuff, retirement incentives, there's all kinds of different things. So you can really get down into the details of that. So that whole process can take a long time if you're pretty far apart to begin with, or it can go pretty quickly sometimes. Historically speaking, in fact, this last time we got through it, fairly well, fairly quickly. We try to do that over the course of the summertime where there's no kids in school. The teachers are not, having to actively worry about the lesson plans and teaching kids and stuff. So there's a little bit more time available. But ultimately, we come to an agreement on all of that, and then the Board of Education votes on it, and then the teachers' union takes it to all of their membership, and it has to pass on I believe it's just a majority vote, among the teachers, and as long as it passes both sides, then that is the agreed upon contract, and all the different parts and pieces and all the stuff that include all the various things that we've talked about. So that's essentially how that whole process works. But that is a very important thing, that goes on. You hear sometimes about teachers will want to strike or things like that. And sometimes that's tied to a contract negotiation where the two sides are just not coming together. And so the teachers could do that, or the board, could take their action or whatever. So anyway, but fortunately for us, we've never gotten to that point. We've got a great relationship with our teachers and our union leadership. And, I think that we trust each other, and it's, we certainly can still come to the table and say, hey, I think that what you're proposing is a little bit ridiculous, respectively speaking, but they say that to us as well. And that's just part of the whole negotiation process. And it works out very well.
And that whole negotiation process is very, prescripted by school policy, right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, policy certainly plays a part in that. As we look at the contract, then we say, hey, what does our policy allow? what are some of our goals for the district? So we on the board side, we're saying, hey, what are we looking for in 5, 10 years from now, to really try to plan out that long-term approach. And so that may drive some of the things that we come to the table with, and we explain that. We'll say, hey, we are wanting to offer X, Y, and Z so that we can do, A, B, and C in the future.
Right.
Or 1, 2, and 3, or whatever, and then the teachers may come back and say, "Hey, I get that, I appreciate that. However, the X, Y, and Z you're offering today is not quite going to cut it, or whatever."
Right.
And or let's tweak that a little bit. So, and again, that's where we go back and forth. But yes, but the policies that we have, the goals, the vision, that the board has, absolutely drives, what we do and how we come to the table.
Well, and not just like District 90 policy, but I'm talking about Illinois school board, school policy, school code.
Yes.
I guess, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. There are legal requirements that say, you need to do this or that. So yes, we've got to stay in line. That's, I talked about our lawyer being there, and then they also have legal counsel. Pretty much anything we do, we say, hey, lawyer, just want to make sure this is legal, and we've never had any issue with that. I mean, he keeps us in check, and frankly, we're not ever like pushing the limits of legality. But yes, there are Illinois school code or the various legal requirements that drive you down a certain road. Yep.
All right. Well, John, I've taken up a lot of your time. I have a couple quick questions, just like kind of a lightning round kind of thing. I've never done this with a guest before, but so.
Great. Yeah, let's do it. I'll try to stay with quick answers. I know sometimes I go on a little bit.
So, you've answered some of these before, so there's no need for, big explanation. So first of all, can you hire people directly? Can you as a board?
Well, so we approve the hiring action, but I can't go make I can't go offer them the position.
Can you fire people?
Sort of. Again, me personally, no. The board takes that final action on a termination, but we would not be the ones involved in that, that direct action initially.
Can you get teachers in trouble?
No, I would say not any more than, say, a typical parent could. It's not like we wear this badge that says, "Oh, I'm a school board member, therefore I can really get you in trouble." So I would say the short answer would be no on that.
And how long is your term?
The terms are 4 years, and so 4 years.
It seems like in O'Fallon, the elections for school members are always in April. Is that always the case, or is that just?
Yes, that is the case. It's the, I don't remember what Tuesday, like the first Tuesday after the first Monday in April or whatever it is. I don't remember exactly, but yes, but it's always in April. That's correct.
Okay. How much do you get paid?
I get paid $0. So we joke sometimes. We're like, "Hey, we're going to double our salary this year," or whatever. So it's a little school board joke.
Can board members receive any sort of compensation other than money, like event tickets or laptops or a cell phone or anything like that?
No. There's none of that kind of stuff that we get. Basically you can think of this as a volunteer. You are an elected official, but it is a volunteer from a financial money perspective. And
last one, are you glad you took on this position?
I am glad. I believe that I've been able to make a positive difference, going all the way back for my kids, but also for the other kids in District 90 in O'Fallon. And, and there's, frankly, I think that there's a certain amount of just personal satisfaction to know that, hey, I'm serving my community and trying to make this a better place to be. So I'm glad I've done it.
All right. And before I let you go, what's the one thing that you wish school employees knew about their board, just in general?
Yeah, I would say that we support you. We want what's best for this community, and certainly for the school district. And ultimately, we are doing this. All of us are doing this, for our kids. We want our kids to have the best educational opportunities that they can possibly have. And so while sometimes, there may be some disagreements here and there, at the end of the day, we're doing this for the kids, and that's where our heart is, as a board member, and we want you as school teachers, staff, administrators, all that, to know that man, we support you and we want to do what's best for you and for the kids.
Fantastic. Well, I'd say that's a positive note to leave this on. So, John, thank you so much for your time today and explaining the board. I learned some stuff even. So there you go.
Hey, man, it's been my pleasure, man. I really appreciate you putting this together, and for all the great work you do as well, Matt. I appreciate it. Thank
you. And thank all of you out there for listening to the Teacher's Classroom podcast. You can find this episode and others on teachillinois.com/podcasts. It's our home. I'll be posting some links. I think I need to go and post the IASB link with the responsibilities of the board on here.
Sure.
This podcast is supported by the Illinois Area 5 Initiative for Innovation and Technology. And I urge all of you out there to share this episode with other people and like and subscribe. And we will see you next time right here on the Teacher's Classroom.